The values of equality and equity have to do with how we relate to power. I'm going to say that again. The values of equity and equality have to do with how we relate to power. And in every intimate relationship, power can be held by one person and it can also be shared.
I don't like to argue, so I say nothing and fume for days.
How do I set boundaries without sounding like a jerk?
I hate the idea that I might accidentally offend somebody, so sometimes I'd just rather say nothing at all.
Welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast, and thank you for joining me today. This is your host, Alejandra, a transformative communication teacher and coach. I am devoted to helping multicultural individuals and couples on the path of transformation transform their lives and relationships through conscious communication. Thank you for being here with me, learning to bring more love and more peace to your life and all your relationships. If you've been listening to the Language Alchemy Podcast for some time, you've heard me say that I'm devoting the third episode of the month to answering your questions. And this is what I'm doing today. And before we start, if you'd like to ask me questions about communication, it's very easy. Just go to languagealchemy.com/podcast question and enter your communication question there. Then I'll answer it on the podcast. I'll add the link in the show notes. Today, I'm going to answer a beautiful question about communication with a partner or significant other. I know this question is going to give you a lot to think about. And my hope is that you'll come away from this episode with greater awareness about your own communication with your partner or with someone with whom you have a meaningful relationship. This question came from Diana from Los Angeles, California. Diana's question is, how do you know if you're communicating with equality and equity in an intimate relationship? Diana shared that she and her partner come from different cultures and backgrounds. They were born and raised in different countries with different languages. They both use English to communicate, which is her partner's primary language and her second language. Diana also told me that she knows she and her partner value equality and equity as a general value, but she doesn't know how to find out if they're communicating those values within the relationship. What a beautiful question, Diana. And your question is so rich that I need 2 episodes to answer it. In this episode, I am going to talk about how to know that you have equality. And then in the next episode, I'm going to talk about how you know that you have equity in your communication with your partner. As someone who's also in a committed relationship with a partner who came from a different culture, background, country, and who, like you, we use English to communicate. And like your partner, my partner's first language is English, which is my second language. This question is very dear to my heart and something that my beloved and I continuously work on. Now, for all of you who are listening right now, if you live in the United States like I do, you've heard the words equity and equality a lot in recent years, especially after the killing of George Floyd. And perhaps you think that equity and equality are values related to large groups of people, organizations, communities, societies. So from the get-go, I want to address this by saying that even if you and your partner come from similar backgrounds, or if you both identify with the same ethnic, religious, social, racial, linguistic group, you may be wondering about the relevance of this question in your relationship. And you may be tempted to skip this episode, but hear me out for a second. The values of equality and equity have to do with how we relate to power. I'm going to say that again. The values of equity and equality have to do with how we relate to power. And in every intimate relationship, power can be held by one person and it can also be shared. If we look at the etymology of the word partnership, what we find is that the word comes from Latin and it means a sharing or distribution. And later on from Old French, It means part holder. According to the Etymology Online Dictionary, the meaning of partner from the late 14th century is, and I quote, one who shares power or authority with another. And even though I'm going to focus on equality in this episode and equity on the next one, it's important to know that if you want to have a healthy and mature conscious partnership, there needs to be shared power. And shared power happens when your communication has both equity and equality. Now, before I tell you how to know whether you are communicating in alignment with equality in your partnership, let me talk about equality so that we can start from a perspective of shared meaning. Perhaps like me, you have already done a lot of work exploring the values of equality and equity. And in my opinion, the clearest way of understanding them comes from a picture. Yes, you've heard that a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? But since I'm using words here to communicate with you, I need to describe this picture. This picture has two words, equity and equality. The graphical representation of equality has a picture of various people. Kids, adults, people with abilities, people with physical disabilities, people of various heights. Some are short and some are tall. And all people, regardless of their unique needs, have the exact same bike. And that is equality. You offer all parties the same thing. Now, you may be wondering, how would this sound in communication with your partner? Well, let's say that you want to have a conversation with your partner about where to go on vacation. And in order to honor equality, you say, I'll talk for 5 minutes, and then you talk for 5 minutes. And maybe after we each talk for 5 minutes, we can be ready to decide where to go on vacation together. If you give each other the same amount of time, 5 minutes for both, you are having equality in your communication. And now that we have established a shared meaning of the value of equality, let me talk about some indicators to find out whether equality is present or absent in your communication with your partner. So as I go through this list, I'd love for you to think about your partnership. And if you are not in a partnership at the moment, think about a past partnership or think about a future partnership that you would like to have. When you have equality in your communication with your partner, you both have the same rights and responsibilities. So, for example, you both have the right to talk freely about your experiences, your emotions, and whatever matters to you. You both have the space to be heard by the other. You are both able to ask about your individual as well as your collective needs. You both hold reasonable expectations of each other, whatever reasonable means to both of you. You both share the power to make decisions. You both have the ability to make suggestions. You both apologize when you hurt the other. You both show up to the inevitable conflicts with respect and good intentions. You both feel you can be authentic, honest, and transparent. You are both aware of your similarities. You're both conscious of your intention to share power. And while sometimes you lead your partner and sometimes you follow their lead, most of the time you feel like you and your partner are living your life side by side. So I've just given you 12 indicators that you have equality in your communication with your partner. How did you do? How many of these did you say yes to? How many of these indicators you recognize are present in your communication with your partner? Take a moment to reflect on this and notice how it feels in your body. And now let's look at some markers that show you there's an absence of equality in your communication with your partner. When you don't have equality in your communication, one of you or both of you feel like you can't speak your truth freely. You are unsure of how to be authentic. You have the internal feeling that you have to walk on eggshells. You feel uncomfortable expressing your feelings or asking for what you need. You justify yourself excessively and give long explanations about your decisions. You overplease your partner and deny yourself of the same things that you let your partner have, and then you feel resentful. Your partner has more rights and you have more responsibilities, or vice versa. You expect to have more rights than your partner. So, for example, you hold your partner responsible for all the conflict in the relationship, and you let yourself off the hook for your part. And even when you hurt your partner, you do not apologize. You know, I've helped lots of couples who don't have equality in their partnerships. And when there's no equality, there's a lot of tension in the relationship. It's very hard to have intimacy and deep connection with your partner when you don't feel that you are equals. And if this is your experience, if you feel inferior to your partner in any way and you don't know how to talk about it with your partner because you see them as superior or as holding greater authority and power over you, and of course this feels painful and uncomfortable, then that's an indicator that you need to work on communicating the value of equality. And you need to explore your own relationship to power. And how do you work with this? You start with your communication in your internal dialogue. And then you work on learning to communicate equality with your partner. And if you'd like to have equality in your communication with your partner, I would love to support you. So reach out and let's talk about how I can be of service to you. At the moment, I have a few spots available for my transformative communication coaching programs for 3, 6, or 9 months. You can work with your value of communicating equality by yourself or with your partner. If you'd like to do this work by yourself, check out languagealchemy.com/one-on-one. And if you'd like to work together with your partner, then go to languagealchemy.com/couples. Once you're on my website, you can schedule a communication coaching consultation with me, and we'll go from there. I will add the links in the show notes. And now let's recap what you've heard in this episode. In this episode, I answered a question from one of our listeners. Her question was about how to know that there's equity and equality in the communication with her partner. At first, I talked about equality and equity in the context of your relationship to power. Then I shared that in a healthy, mature, conscious relationship, you need to be able to communicate both equity and equality. I also described what equality means and gave you a communication example of what it would sound like to have equality present in your communication with your partner. And then I offered you 2 lists. One list with indicators that equality is present in your communication, and the second list with markers that equality is absent in your communication with your partner. I also talked about what happens when there isn't equality in a relationship. Finally, I invited you to have these conversations with your partner and to ask for support if you notice you need it. As I shared in the beginning, I have worked on this in my marriage with my beloved Matthew and continue to work on bringing equality to our partnership. We've learned to make space for these conversations, and we've noticed, just like with all the couples I helped, that when we have these conversations, our relationship strengthens and our intimacy deepens. So whether you are or aren't having conversations about equality in your partnership, please know that it will be of great benefit to talk about this or to learn to have these conversations. I know you can do this. Thank you so much for listening, and a special thanks to all my clients who have addressed equality in their relationships and are now not only embodying that value in their intimate relationships, but also with their families at work, and in their communities. And next week, I am going to talk about how to have equity in your communication with your intimate other. Until next week, and as we say in Argentina, ciao, ciao. Original music by Gary LaPoe. You can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com.